Hi everybody, this is Jeffrey Mann reading from my book Deathmatch, and in it you'll see a picture of me at that time as I was going to undertake this, and on it I have written, "It is said, and it is true, that every close pass by a bull's horn, every deliberate close brush with death is equivalent to 1 year of normal living." And it is so. So there's a nice picky of me there. I remember it being taken. Whoa, that's way back. And then the story, just before chapter 1, is of the death match is based on a true story experienced by the author, me, who in 1976 accepted a $1 million wager for a fight to the death with a great white shark using only a knife. It was to be held in an underwater iron cage in Samoa with closed-circuit TV broadcast live to the US, Russia, and Japan via satellite. The story made front-page headlines in the New York Magazine, April 5, 1976. Man vs. Shark, $1 million death match in Samoa, sponsored by Sargent's Productions Hollywood. The real match actually never took place. It was cancelled at the very last minute by the world-famous oceanographer Jacques Cousteau. But this is a story of what might have happened. The knife on the front page is the actual knife, it's in the kitchen behind me here, that I would have used for that fight. So buckle up your seatbelts and enjoy this. So I'm going to start off and read you the first chapter a bit, and a couple more excerpts from the book, and you'll really enjoy this one. It's like one of the best James Bond style books you've ever read. It even turns me on actually reading it all this time afterwards, and I'm just read it so many times. Chapter 1. A shark fight for $1 million. Greg Quarrington's blue eyes opened in surprise. It's to be filmed for a private group, rich people. He could feel the pulse beating in his fingertips, a tightening in his chest, the almost forgotten tingle of excitement. He turned the idea over in his mind, examining it, savoring it, while enjoying the feel of Suki's hands. "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" "Because you are my friend." He picked up on her use of the past tense. "Was your friend?" "I am your friend. Please lie still." Suki's massage and acupuncture needles were the only relaxation that could unstring him after a day in his clinic. A successful physician, Greg felt he'd come to the edge, each patient draining his mental reserves until there was nothing left. Life had become a repetitive, drab monochrome, the colors bleached out, an ulcer diet with no end in sight. "I want that fight, Suki." The few real challenges, the dangerous ones, he had tried them all, calculating the risks to finer, then still finer tolerances, and yet he survived, always at the very limit, hating it because he was addicted, unable to resist because it was there. Like a matador, every close pass of the bull's horn equal to a year's living. He heard Suki's reluctant whisper, "Greg, it's dangerous, very dangerous." Taking her hands away, Suki reached up to the cabinet and selected the needles. Greg hardly felt the tiny sliver of metal buried to his shank in his right foot. She rotated the acupuncture needle slowly. "Who's financing it?" The needle stopped turning. She paused, weighing the next sentence carefully, groping for the right words. "I'm sorry I told you. You don't have to involve yourselves in that kind of a deal." "Who do I contact?" Suki took a deep breath, then let it out slowly as if releasing something inside. "Let me finish this, then I'll give you a number to call. You can get all the details yourself." It was a second needle that did it. He watched her support the hair-thin shaft between her tips of her fingers, then deftly spin and drive it down above his left thumb. The warm flush started immediately, radiating out from his neck and shoulders, and washing down over his body. With a sigh, Greg stretched out, breathing slowly, letting it settle, adjusting to the strange warm lassitude, the coiled pressure draining out of his body. Twirling the needles, Suki looked down at him, watching the muscles relax, go limp, and flatten out. She let her eyes run over the tanned, well-muscled bodies whose face stretched gaunt under a shock of sun-bleached hair. Already a ghost, dead. Why had she done it? Why had she told him? Greg had been trying to kill himself for years in endless, desperate search for excitement. He would have succeeded sooner or later anyway. Deep down, she could never forgive him for that. With a quick flick of her wrist, Suki plucked the needles out, wiping each one carefully with alcohol before putting it in the used dish marked with a black cross. Greg took a slow, deep breath. He felt good. He looked at Suki, puzzled by her anxiety. They had been friends for years. She was a beautiful girl, part French, part Saigonese. Suki Lafleur was smooth-skinned, delicate, with enormous liquid black eyes, high cheekbones, short, thick black hair, a curious mixture of European sophistication overlaid by Asiatic reticence. As he dressed, Greg watched her putting away the needles, stacking the round dishes in neat rows, arranging them by size with her deft, precise movements. She gave no impression of haste, yet each movement flowed into the next without hesitation. Again he wondered why it had always kept their relationship platonic. It was her hands, the relaxation that only she could give him. The way she used the needles on his body, draining away the accumulation of poison. She was the best. Half turning, Greg pulled two slats of the window blind apart. Blue flecks of the Pacific sparkled between the buildings, cooling in the late afternoon sun. Out of the corner of his eyes he watched Suki's reflection in the wall mirror. She was staring at him in a strange, intent way. He turned and faced her, watching her eyes flick away. "Who put you onto this?" Greg said, taking out a cigarette and lighting it. Suki stopped moving. She was looking at him, her eyes darkening. "A client." She gave no name. Greg didn't press her. He had what he wanted. The rest he'd find out for himself later. Brushing her cheek with his hand, he ran his thumb lightly along the black gloss of an eyebrow. "Thanks, friend. I think you've given me the one chance I need to go on living." Suki watched the door close behind him. Why had she given him that number? He was a dead man, and the irony of it was Greg believed that she had given him a chance of living again. Now he had none at all. She knew she had to make the call. A single tear formed and ran down her cheek unnoticed as she picked up the telephone and dialed. Barry Winkler's familiar, sharp voice answered. "I have the man for you." Suki paused, waiting, feeling his impatience. "He's a doctor," she added. "I gave him your number." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "How many more times must I do this, Mr. Winkler?" She heard the click, the hum of the empty line. She stared at the dead phone in her hand. And that is the end of the beginning, to just get you intrigued. I will give you a couple more samples and then you can enjoy the whole ebook for $3.99 at the website electricbookstore.net, as in fishing net. There's a lot of good stuff in there with all these books, and I've given lots of readings, and there's actually a video there too for you to read, an audio video. So you can see who's written about this, and this is giving you the real life. These are real things I'm telling you about in both this story and the other book. So thank you again for listening, and I will say au revoir.